I come from a matrilineal society. My mother and my grandmother believe that when song, ceremony, and dancing stops, so does the earth. I too believe that. So I want to offer a song to you. I want to offer a grandmother's song to honor our grandmothers, their grandmothers, and an all Mother Earth. For without them and without her, we would not be here. We share this time and space together for a reason. So it's with that humility, that gratitude, that present-mindedness that I offer this song to you here right now. And can I hear you all say "oh" in 3, 2, 1? Oh! All right. It's a good way to send off the song. It's sometimes a better way, better than clapping or snapping or twinkle fingers, kind of like applause. And so sending it off in a good way is a beautiful way. So this is Kanyon's grandmother song. Moi moi o kawana, moi moi o ka, moi moi no, moi moi o ko, moi moi o ne ayo konale, moi moi ayo konale, moi moi o kawana, moi moi o ko, moi moi no, moi moi o ko, moi moi o ne ayo konale, moi moi ayo konale, moi moi o kawano, moi moi o ko, moi moi no, moi moi o ko, moi moi o ne ayo konale, moi moi ayo konale. No son and oh and oh. Can I hear you say oh? All right, you send it off in a good way. Awesome, awesome. So my name is Kanyon, and I was born and raised in Indian Canyon. And it's been a challenge as an Indigenous person in the 21st century. I'm still relearning my language. I'm part of many Indigenous communities and cultures, but it's been a slow decolonization process. And I enter a lot of circles talking about this decolonization process, re-indigenization process, but in essence, it's honoring our ancestors. All of us have ancestors that have indigenous lineages from the land that they're from. To take all of that amazing wisdom, package it again, because we are a society of, we're a byproduct of capitalism and of colonization, and then we give it new names. But when we honor the true indigenous lineages, we need to bring all of that wisdom. We need to acknowledge that all life systems are sacred, that the animals, the plants are our kin. And when we respect them, we can have that more integral relationship to our responsibility. Because being raised with my community, they've always shared with me that humans are the second people. The animals are the first. And when we are the second people, first humans, we have been given these gifts. And with these gifts comes that responsibility of stewarding and tending the land, being respectful to all living systems, and being a part of, not to capitalize or resource grab. And so that's the part of today's society that we need to start untangling ourselves as seeing something as a resource or seeing something as something that needs to be enterprised or capitalized off of. To have an integral responsibility to our environment, to our communities, and to the next generations. So what I want to ask of you is think about the land that you're on and think about your responsibility to the next generations. Yes, we may want to have opportunities and financial stability to make sure the next generation has opportunity, but will that be at the expense of our carbon footprint? Will that be at the expense? And so when I shared with you it's a struggle reconnecting to culture and reconnecting to traditional pathways, footsteps. In relearning all of this, we recognize that history has been written by the victor, or at least by those who can manage that system. But when we start decolonizing and we look and let the land speak to us, let the environment speak to us, we can recognize that there have been practices that are deeper than written history. Like, I'll give an example. When I started working with Lee Klinger of Sudden Oak Life, he voiced about the disease of sudden oak death, and how there's so much money going into, oh, let's talk about the disease, and all that money is being spent and wasted when it's not a singular instance, it's an ecological occurrence where we have not been tending the land with fire. When you think about oak, it's very resilient against fire. California, up and down, has been managed with fire before contact. But it would be managed differently. It wouldn't be like quadrant off, let's do like a 10 mile by 10 mile. It would be different areas. But when you think about that, it talks about the soil health. It talks about the plant health. It talks about the animal health. It talks about the river health. And that wasn't documented when colonizers came, when people came to settle the land. California went through 3 waves of genocide, 3 waves of colonization, from the missions being established, saying that we're savages and heathens, neophyte quarters, and engaging in sodomite behavior because of their value systems. And then we have the Mexican occupation, where they had California before it was California. And then we have the gold rush, where it was legal to eradicate the California native. $5 a head, 50 cents a scalp. And then we have today where people are like, oh, I'm native too, I watch Dances with Wolves. And it's kind of, it's fun, it's painful for people to be like, I'm jumping on the bandwagon too, because DNA, 23andMe and DNA testing says, oh, many of us have indigenous lineages. But once you learn that, what are you doing about it? Are you engaging in your culture? Are you connecting to community? Are you accountable to the elders? Are you accountable to that territory? Are you doing your best to be an ally or an accomplice? And so when it comes to honoring truth in history, even though some of us may or may not have lineages or ties to the land, some of us may be 2nd or 3rd generation. Or myself, I have many generations, but I can't speak to traditional practices because I'm still relearning them. But I still know a lot, and I will do my best to be a strong ally to indigenous peoples of the lands that I visit, and I will be an advocate for truth in history to the best of my ability. And so learning from some of these records, i.e., like, let's say the mission journals, who talk about, there's an area that's burned up here, you're not going to find any firewood. It's like, oh, okay, at least there's a dated record that acknowledged an area that was burned. And then they learn that up and down the coast. And we take that knowledge and we start thinking about, what does it really mean to look at this in a restorative, regenerative fashion? Now, it's kind of painful. I'm not a big fan of John Muir because, yes, he did conserve, which is really awesome. Preserving, conserving, really wonderful. But guess what? He hated Native Americans. He hated us. Like, really, really bad. But like, when we think about our conservation methods, a lot of us do this whole, let's put a fence around it and preserve it, keep it wild. So all of our governing institutions, our agencies, our state parks, are all trying to conserve something that was meant to be stewarded. And that's a governing practice that's not the most healthy for the land. We're shooting ourselves in the foot by leaving it wild. We need to re-engage our responsible, integral relationship to the land, to the communities, to all living life systems. And so I come to these spaces to bring that up. I am a co-founder of Kanyon Consulting LLC, which is a consultation firm that bridges that gap with that Western thought process and with indigenous perspectives, and how indigenous perspectives can help us shape and shift solutions and strategies to better opportunities for the future. And right now, I have to start from the ground up. I have to start from just giving people an overview of truth and history before we can even start talking about solutions. Because how do you talk about solutions when not everybody has been informed? I kind of make a parallel play to talking about my cultural competency trainings and my Indigenous Insight intensives. I talk about it similar to the struggle of, let's talk about like sexual harassment. Long ago, there was never any of those courses, never any acknowledgement. HR didn't have a policy or a process to deal with that. Some people were on the offended end, some were the offending. So how do you make sure that your organization can go forward informing everyone and then having due process? Well, you need to have an overview of everyone educated the same way. Everyone's educated and brought up to the same level, and any instance after that They will be informed that that behavior is good or bad, and this is the due process that will happen. So I'm kind of like right before that whole level playing field of educating everyone. So I'm still just trying to reach out grassroots, connect with community, acknowledge truth and history, and then we talk about solidarity, we talk about allyship, we talk about advocacy, and we talk about accomplices who are ready to be present and engage. And so I'm really happy that this is happening, because some of these difficult conversations have to happen. Some of these organizations may have a past that they're too nervous of. So when we are going out there to influence other communities to say, these practices are what we need to adopt and adapt to make a better world, we also need to think about, okay, what about the ones with a not so great past? Do we just not talk to them because we're mad at them? Or do we say, hey, this is yes, you're trying to come along. And yes, that past is kind of hard, but what are we doing currently? What are we doing today and in the now? We have to acknowledge some of these spaces that we have privileges. I, as a woman, have privileges men do not have. I know that. I am sometimes advantageous of that, but at the same time, I will be an advocate, because I am totally against certain occurrences in today's world, i.e. toxic masculinity and all that. But when it comes to opening spaces, it's very necessary, because you may get a chance to understand perspective that you're unfamiliar with. You may get a chance to speak to indigenous communities or people of color within an urban territory, that their knowledge or their insight or their just experiences may be so diverse from ours, and in witnessing those perspectives, we can gain an opportunity to get that insight that just kind of just takes it over the top and saying, wow, I didn't think about that, but now that we're thinking about that, we can start figuring out what it means to work with that knowledge. And when we work with that knowledge, the more diversity you have, the more opportunity you have. I know it can be a challenge because we're kind of used to creating things on an industrial fashion. So you should welcome that challenge, because, well, it helps us grow. Those challenges are very necessary. And so when you go back to your territories, find out. Find out about the indigenous peoples of those lands. Some of the communities, like the languages, may be dormant. I was able to introduce myself to you in my language. Mishmin Tuhis means good day in my language. But right here is a linguistic map of California. A lot of these languages are dormant. A lot are being revitalized. But with that, it's reaching out to the community members, the tribal groups, the culture bearers, and those people who are with the land, who speak about their communities and their relationship to the land, because you get that perspective that's not always been in those history books, not always been in these areas, because like, I kind of ask everybody, we all know that little gem, that little song, in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Who did he run into? What language did they speak? What were their sacred waters? What were their sacred mountains? Who were their neighbors? It's been over 526 years, maybe 27, sorry. And 500 plus years, and we don't actively know that, unless you've majored in that realm, i.e. English, history, Native American studies, and other areas. We're not taught. And when we're not taught that information, we don't familiarize ourselves, and it's not normal. It's not normalized, and it's not a part of how we engage in the world. And if it's not a part of how we engage in the world, it's not going to be acknowledged. We follow a protocol of knocking on the door when we want to visit our neighbor and borrow a cup of sugar. We knock on the door, but that's if there's a door there. But in today's capitalistic, colonial settler mentality, people go, oh, there's no door, there's no fence, there's nothing protecting it. I can go there, I'm entitled to it. But in all actuality, we might be going to someone else's territory, taking advantage of that environment. And I make an example of how we are reactionary. When we want to solve a problem, we don't invest in the community and think about how we have an impact. We kind of react. Like when rats come off of a ship and they take over, devastating the native population, instead of figuring out what it means to get rid of that invader, let's go get snakes! And go get snakes. And find out one's nocturnal and one's daylight. So a reactionary, let's solve the problem, created more of an issue. And so what does it mean to establish relationship? What does it mean to connect to community? What does it mean to withhold with some decision-making practices? Of course, yes, we live in today's 21st century world. We need to keep go, go, go. We need to think about profit. We need to think about sustainability. But consider the perspectives you may not know. Consider the opportunities that may not be had because someone may not be at your table, or someone may not be in your community of decision makers. My mother taught me, and my mother goes to classrooms, 3rd, 4th, 5th graders, and now I do that, and university students. My mother loves to talk to like 4th graders because the mission curriculum, she says, someday in the future, you'll be in the position of making decisions, huge decisions, that are bigger than yourself and very important. Will you consider how your actions impact not only yourself, your community, your business, the environment, but how will it impact 7 generations in the future? When we think about that, take the time to actually digest that. Sometimes it means saying no to the quick turnaround. Sometimes it means saying no to that quick profit, that quick dime, but you're actually investing in the future. You're investing in that decision-making practice that's bigger than yourself. It's beyond you, because you are a part of everything. And so I invite you to reach out to your community and find those perspectives that aren't being represented in your space. Because when we do it, it's an opportunity to learn. It's an opportunity to consider those things. So I'm really happy that the individual who's coming up right after me was like, oh, we have welcome to country in our territory. I'm like, yes! But here it's not as common. It's not as common. So I ask you, do you know about your Native people in your community, and can you invite them to spaces and places? Just a chance to start a relationship, at least an opportunity to be acquaintances. Because welcome to country, welcome to land acknowledgements, indigenous perspectives can offer so many insights to our community. I want to close this out with a song. And how many of you love to see hummingbirds pollinating? So can I hear you all say humunya? Humunya. That's the Mutsun word for hummingbird. And right down here, what we call Ohlone territory, from San Francisco Bay down to at least Monterey Bay, is Ohlone territory. And Ohlone territory is comprised of over 8 languages, 8 distinct language dialects. So technically, Ohlone is a misnomer, but it's an identifying term that I identify with. The Spaniards called us Costanoan, or Costaños, and they just showed up in San Francisco. Costaños, Costaños, coastal Indians. They show up in Monterey. Costaños, Costaños. This is what we're going to name you. But when other community members started investing and witnessing the community, they would notice different languages, different dialects, different communities, different practices. And so I come from the Mutsun-speaking territory of Ohlone territory. And down in Monterey, they say humaya. So it's very similar. And so I want to offer a little hummingbird song and then close it out in a good way. So this is hummingbird song to acknowledge hummingbird, part of our creation story. Hummingbird and the animals were of the first people, the first community, and actually brought life to humans. So this is a tribute to hummingbird. Humunya, 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 weha, weha. Humunya, 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 weha, weha, ho. Humunya, 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 weha, weha. Humunya, 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 weha, weha, ho. Humunya, 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 weha, weha, humunya, 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 weha, weha, ho. Humunya, 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 weha, weha, humunya, 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 weha, weha, ho. Humunya, 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 weha, weha, humunya, 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 weha, weha, ho. Humunya, 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 weha, weha, humunya, 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 weha, weha, ho. Oh. So again, welcome. Welcome to Coast Miwok and Pomo territory. Become familiar with the Native nations that you're visiting, the languages of the land, and opportunities to connect with community. I really appreciate you here. I appreciate you connecting and wanting to be a part of this. I'm a neighbor of Piscinas Ranch. Literally, that property is right next to Indian Canyon. And so I get to go visit there and acknowledge that right here, right now, we're in my home territory. And I get to speak about the Mutsun community. I'm from the Indian Canyon Mutsun Band of Costanoan Ohlone people. And I just want to say thank you. And I hope you have a great end of the week and safe travels home. So I'm gonna just offer, can I get you all to offer a lulu? Because it's a great way just to like shake up the energy. It's a lulu, it's a celebration. I know some of you might be embarrassed to try, but just try it. It's just pretty much going really, really loud to shout it out. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Thank you so very much.